What's up, YouTube? This is Let's Discuss MMA. And what I'm going to be doing in this series is basically going over prospects that I believe could be a future contender and even possibly a champion. In today's case, we have Colby Thicknesse, who is going to be fighting on tonight or Saturday's fight night, nicknamed Slickness. I'm going to be doing a basic overview. I'm going to be going into some of the stat lines, some of the things he could work on, what kind of fighter he is, and basically introduce some of the greener guys in the UFC. Just because as an end of an era is coming with Dustin retiring, with Justin Gaethje probably on his last few fights, with a bunch of legends in the sport, not just in the lightweight division, but in general, that are coming to an end of an era. I thought it would be nice to bring up prospects and guys that could possibly get the torch passed down to them. So today we have Colby Thicknesse, who's going to be fighting against Josias Musaya. He's 7-1 currently in the UFC at 26 years of age, standing about 5'7" and a reach of 69. He does fight at the same gym as Volkanovski, and not only that, he has trained with Volkanovski ever since he was a kid. So he does have that switch stance style similar to Volkanovski, and he is more of a grappler, however, though. But I think he's a pretty good striker. I think there's definitely things he can work on, and we'll be talking about that. A lot of good footwork, a lot of good movement. He's always moving back, encircling to not get backed into the cage. I think he has a good read on distance. There are definitely some things he could work on as far as defensively, and I'll be getting into that. But some of the key aspects I did see in his fight, especially against Topuria and even his older fights, is that he does utilize his kicks very well, whether it be a step up kick like the Volkanovski front kick that Volk does all the time, or whether it be high kicks to the body, high kicks to the head, or body kicks. Coming from both stances, I think it's a very dangerous weapon because at the end of the day, your legs, for the most part, are usually the longest parts of your body, and just utilizing those long rangy techniques would definitely be advantageable against other opponents. He does well using a lot of the pitter patter shot method, I like to call it. It's basically a guy that doesn't possess as much power, but he's going to throw you as much volume as you can and try to get away with it without getting hit with a big shot. But in his game plan, I think jabs and teeps are definitely key. As far as defensively, what I've seen from some of his footage is he doesn't utilize too much head movement. He does do more of a shelling style when he's blitzed with a power shot. He basically tries to smother the power, whether he comes into the power or he'll just shell up, just like a regular just shell up. But other than that, I haven't seen too much of a good defensive reaction when he does get blitzed or gets hit with a hard shot. Although he does have very good distance management for the most part, and he does move out of range. A lot of good footwork, like I was talking about. He'll give you different looks, get different angles. He knows when to come in and when to come out. It's just that when he does get splits, or if the opponent is aggressive, he does tend to either shell up or he'll grapple or tie up with a collar tie. I guess some of the cons that I see because of this pitter patter shot is just when he's throwing out multiple jabs. Maybe he's throwing three, four, just to feel that jab, or even maybe for the range. He tends to leave his hand down, and that's just a habit that a lot of fighters just have. It's kind of like a reset, but it shouldn't be. It should be, jab and then come back to the face, jab and come back to the face. But even myself, who trains, I do this at times where I get a little bit lazy and I'll pop three or four jabs just to get a range finder, or just to get a feel out for the opponent, and I'll drop my lead hand even just slightly. And if we saw in the Topuria fight, he was countered a big shot, just because that lead hand was so down low to either his chest area, or even sometimes he'll reset a little bit too slow before he can get back to his face, and there's an opening for high level counter strikers and even guys that are just at the UFC level. So I would like to see more of a focus on popping that lead jab out, but also making sure he brings it back to his face and not getting lazy with it. If he does, create some distance between him and his opponent. And I guess the one of the pros and cons, and this is just a mix of volume strikers, and we've seen him with Volk when he versed Topuria too, in Max against Topuria as well, is you know, you're very good at pressuring. You have a lot of cardio because you're throwing maybe two, three, 400 strikes a fight. But against someone like a power puncher like Taporia, or someone that's a finisher, yeah, it's the fight can be dragged on to the point where a single shot, even though you're winning the entire fight, can change that trajectory of the fight. Just like when Volk was fighting against Diego Lopez, one of the key aspects was is Volk going to be able to last for 5 rounds until Diego can catch him with one shot, right? Whether that be round one or round five, it's always that you have that inkling of worrisome that you could get caught and that could be the end of the fight, or you could drop a round even though you're basically beating him for 4 minutes and 50 seconds. You get caught with a big shot and you get rocked really bad, and you might drop that round depending on how the judges see it, especially with how the judges are all different on how they view fights. So it is very an interesting style. I personally am not a power puncher as well. I'm more of a volume striker, and I've definitely wilted to people that are hit a lot harder than me because you become more susceptible and you realize like, oh, I can't match power for power, and then sometimes this person tends to walk you down, or they're not really worried about you basically taking their lights out, and that's why with volume striking, I think you do have to give that caution of wind that you can hurt the opponent so that you can keep him at bay. I think Volk does a great job of this where he does pitter patter, but then he'll catch it with a big shot, whether it be a left hook, whether it be a big overhand. He does give that feeling out process to the opponent to give him a worrisome of, hey, I do a lot of volume striking, but I can also hurt you on the feet and you can get finished if you don't be careful. So I think that's important. I think Colby could implement that game where he throws lots of pitter patter and he throws a lot of combos, but once in a while, or even if the opponent's coming in and they're being a little bit too aggressive, just give him a nice straight, or give him an overhand or anything that would potentially stop the opponent or the other fighter to come moving forward. What I do like about him, though, as far as Colby, is that because he has the grappling on his side, when an aggressive fighter does come in, it's easier to lock up with them. It's easier to call a tied leader for a body lock. It's easy for a single leg, double leg, because the opponent is opening themselves up as they strike, especially with a big strike. So one of the things I've seen from Colby is that he is a finisher too, even though he does use a lot of volume striking, whether it be with submissions, and he does look for TKOs at times, just like his in the last fight. He did have a TKO victory with elbows. So it is good that he's trying to finish fights instead of maybe dragging it on. But as you get into higher levels of UFC, it is more difficult because everyone's just so tough, everyone's so well rounded, and it's just not the same level of competition. So hopefully this weekend, what I like to see against Musaya is, because Musaya is a KO puncher, he's a big hitter. I would like to see more of the grappling aspect utilized in his fight, maybe to just negate the power, and maybe later on in the later rounds, maybe late second round to early third round, maybe he can put on the pressure and maybe possibly get a finish via TKO, or even if he keeps on the ground, maybe for a submission. But like I was talking about earlier, he is very good offensively and defensively. I think he does have a pretty slick jujitsu game that's a little bit underrated. I think he has a decent butterfly guard, and he's always moving on the octagon floor. He's not settling for a position. He's not happy with being on his back. He's either looking for a submission. Even against Taporia, he was looking for kimuras. He was looking for an omoplata. I mean, he's looking for a bunch of things that you're going to be worried as an opponent that, hey, this guy's not going to stay stationary, so I'm going to have to either get out of this position where then Colby will get up and back on his feet, or you're going to have to bail on certain positions that you would want to because you don't want to lose that control or you don't want to lose that submission. Offensively, I think the biggest thing I've seen from him is just he does have good rear naked chokes, like most UFC fighters or most fighters in general, because that is, in my opinion, the highest percentage form of submission you could possibly have in a fight. Once you lock up that rear naked, I think it's pretty straightforward from there. And so I would like him to maybe look and hunt for the rear naked choke, maybe put a lot of pressure on the grappling and even the striking. Because as a volume striker, if you do it well and you're not getting hit, you can put a lot of pressure on the opponent where they will slip up, or they just might wilter to your pressure, and there's going to be mistakes being made. And so maybe when that mistake comes, maybe he could take the bag, maybe he can get a body lock, take the fight to the ground, and go from there. I think a big portion of his game that can be leveled up, in my opinion, is just more feints, more leg kicks and teeps. Just like in the Volkanovski, I think the inside leg kicks are very effective just because the inside of that leg is just so much more tender than the outside where you're conditioned to take those kicks. I think the inside of leg kicks is just, it's more of a warning kick, but then over time will add up and fighters will get frustrated. I've used a lot of inside leg kicks in my game, and just personally the inside leg kick is one of those things that people don't really recognize and don't worry about in the beginning, but as the fight goes on, as time goes on, you're like, wait, this actually kind of hurts, and It's just one of those things that comes naturally later on. So using those inside leg kicks and then setting up maybe a good body kick, or even setting up a high kick, or even just setting up your hands, I think that inside leg kick will be another tool in his kit that he can use. And another beautiful aspect in his game is he does use his teep well. I think for being 5'7", 5'9", that's where it ranges. His height is where I've seen from different sources. I think he's a little bit taller, if not a little bit average size for the bantamweight division, and so utilizing those teeps and keeping his opponents at bay would be definitely a big help to him. I think utilizing those combos like he was doing earlier, just overloading the brain and just making sure that the opponent has different things to read. When a fighter can only recognize so many things coming at him, right? He can read a 1-2, he can read a 1-3, he can read a 3-4, he can read all these things. But as the fight progresses, and as you're throwing like 1-3-2, or maybe you're throwing a one teep and then you're throwing another one, it's these little things that add up that the fighter gets overloaded, and then eventually you either catch them or you just overwhelm them and their brain can't process things. Their reaction time slows, especially as the fight goes on. So I think just utilizing and using more feints, using more combos for that for the opponent not being able to read, I think that's very important. And finally, I think one of the biggest thing is he has to utilize the grappling in addition to striking. If you see a lot of great grapplers in the UFC, you see that they don't just rely on just wrestling or jujitsu. Like you have to, especially in today and modern era, they utilize striking in basically correlation with grappling. It's just hand in hand, and even combos such as like maybe a jab jab to a two to a single leg or a double leg is something that is money. It definitely works, even though it seems so trivial and so easy, and that people won't fall for it. It does work because when you're throwing a good 1-1-2, people are cautious of it. Automatically they're going to be more defensive, and that opens up the leg. So even something simple as that, you can even hit a 3-2, because 3-2 with a switch stance to a double leg, basically there's things that you can definitely utilize in your favor, especially because Colby is a switch stance. There's so many more options and viabilities for not just striking, but also different angles for takedowns as well. Another thing I would maybe use is maybe even like a one overhand, which is a jab to an overhand to a body lock, just because like I said, as a volume striker, you have to be able to throw that caution to win and tell your opponent like, "Hey, I can throw power shots as well." So, just a nice jab, just a quick jab, and then just coming over top into a body lock, and then getting that takedown, or even jumping on the back would be a viable option. So overall, I have a little rating system going. I would rate him a C plus for striking. He definitely has some work to do, especially in the UFC, just because he works with such a great team, and also being with Volkanovski, who's around the same weight. Volkanovski's fighting at 145, Colby at 135. I think his striking is definitely going to level up as he continues to work with Volk, especially as Volk kind of heads into retirement a little bit and is passing up the torch to Colby. I think it's gonna be an interesting stylistic matchup for a lot of guys at the 135 division. As far as grappling, I think B at this time is pretty solid. I would like to see a little bit more offensive grappling in the UFC. I know Topuria, that he fought recently, is a high level grappler in itself, just like his brother. They both were on the Greco-Roman team, Olympic wise, and so I think it's hard to say at this time to give him a higher rating. I think he has a lot of potential. I think he does have very good grappling. I've seen some sparring clips of him. Um, and I think it's interesting to see how much more he can improve in the grappling. I think that's a suit that he should probably continue to follow and develop even more, and basically using that to set up his striking as well. The biggest aspect in his game, and I guess but the biggest strength that he has, is definitely his cardio, his heart, as we like to call it. He's definitely a pressure machine. He's gonna continue to walk forward. He's gonna continue to move around. He's gonna give you feints. He's gonna try to look for the takedown. He's gonna try to look for the finish. And so utilizing that cardio against other guys that are maybe physically more talented or physically stronger, I think the cardio aspect is very underrated. If we see guys like Rob, if you see him technique for technique, whether it be on the feet or even the wrestling, you can see that a lot of the stuff is at times rudimentary, but it works. It's not because that it's a special technique that no other guy knows. It's just that the other guys are too exhausted to be able to match that pace. So I think cardio is definitely, if not in my opinion, one of the biggest suits of fighting. And that's going to be a big advantage as he progresses into the UFC, because Guys are gonna be talented. Everyone's gonna be a good striker. Everyone's gonna be a good grappler. Everyone's gonna be tough. But it's a matter of can you continue that for 5 rounds is the biggest thing. And obviously, even in a hard 3 rounder fight, some guys maybe let off the gas for 1 round and maybe half of the second round, and they're done. And then you have a chance to finish that fight, or even turn the judges away to a decision win for you as well. So overall, I think he's a good fighter. There's definitely loads of improvement to be made before he is thrown in with the better guys of the division. I think Topuria definitely was one of those fights where it was kind of prospect versus prospect very early on, and we saw that Topuria is definitely a lot more refined as far as what level he's at. But I think Colby definitely has the edge on improvement just because he's had that loss. He's had a kind of a sour taste in his mouth after the loss to a bigger name, and so overall, I would give him a B minus at this time. Um, and it's going to be interesting to see where the 135 division leads as far as, Marab is maybe coming to an end in his era. And we have not too many guys in the 135 division at this time that I'm super thrilled about as far as prospect. We have Austin Bashi and some other guys, but I think it's going to be interesting to see his matchups against this Saturday and also just from here on out. Well, that's it for me, guys. Thank you for checking out Let's Discuss MMA. If you like these, please like and subscribe, and hopefully we'll make more content in terms of prospects. Thank you.